The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
Hey, what's going on? It is Midwest Swing, part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. I'm Brandon Warne coming at you here. Got Tom Schreier in the room. We got our man Eric running the dials, turning the knobs. What's going on, everybody?
Sounds better because I'm not producing the show. We have a pro.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to have a third body in the building, even though he's not connected, so we're not going to hear from him. He's the nameless, faceless man behind the curtain.
And we should say no Berardino. It's Syracuse Notre Dame this week.
Yeah, that sounds right, because he was talking about Eric Dungy, who's the quarterback for Syracuse. Yeah, I was looking at Mike's tweets, and I tell you, it's not quite as fun to read his tweets when it's about Notre Dame football. Granted, Notre Dame has been terrific. You know just as well as anybody because didn't your brother go there?
My brother went there. My sister is currently there.
Is that where you just were then?
I was at the Notre Dame facility in London, which, by the way, my cab driver out there, diehard Red Sox fan.
That's crazy.
So, listens to every game on the radio, has been to Fenway multiple times, has been to Target Field to watch the Red Sox play the Twins. Mm-hmm. And from a baseball perspective, you see a lot of Yankee caps up there, not surprisingly, right?
Right.
L.A., the Dodgers,
sure.
no Angels. And I know they were just in the World Series, and some Boston, but not as much as you'd think, given they just won the World Series. I know Bill Simmons on his podcast is saying, we don't even have to worry about the Yankees anymore. Yankees haven't really won recently. Boston's won all these championships recently.
Do they have Uber in London? Or is
and yes, there are Ubers now in many foreign countries. But
I've never been to another foreign country except for Canada. And that's because I grew up 10 miles from Canada, and so
you just walk there.
Yeah, basically. When I'm training for my marathon. No, we'd go up there and get dinner. But yeah, so I don't know anything. And in fact, this is what blows people's minds. I've never been in a cab or an Uber before. Ever,
oh, really?
Ever.
Oh, yeah, you brought this fact up a while back.
Well, when I went and covered for zone coverage on the road, I drove to Chicago, drove to Milwaukee, and drove to Kansas City. So I didn't have any need for a ride. And even if I was going to get in an Uber, I was so far away from the stadium. At Wrigley, I was literally 45 minutes from the stadium.
Yeah.
We're definitely not taking Ubers on the company dime there.
So let me tie this together as weirdly as I can. I think there's a handful of franchises in the MLB that probably resonate with everyone. And it's probably in part because for years, teams like the Yankees could just get the best players from the other teams year in, year out, right? They did develop that core four, but supplemented it with a lot of other people's best players. And I know there's a lot of diehard fans around baseball, but I always think of the Cardinals stand out as that weird outlier that's not in a particular large market that has fans all over the nation, right?
Said Red Sox?
No, the Cardinals.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say Red Sox Nation. Oh, yeah, Cardinals have and then they think they're the best fans in baseball.
Yes, it's not even – I've been to 2 games there. It's because they're told that. It's a little like, Wild fans are told this is the state of hockey.
Ugh.
Dead serious that you are. It's not even just you are the best fans in baseball, but the best fans in baseball is the way they phrase it. And we could go down a weird Cardinals rabbit hole, but it's just funny given that you look at the teams that have succeeded recently, and as much as it's more of a level playing field, at some point I would think the Astros may start to become a bigger brand.
Yeah.
But Houston's like the 4th largest city, or at least the 4th largest TV market, right? The Cubs are in the 3rd, Yankees in the 1st, Boston's in something like the 5th, LA's in the 2nd. And it was kind of funny to see the Brewers this year is like 35th. We were looking, it's smaller than I think Austin, Texas or something. They're in Columbus or something like that.
Yeah.
Kansas City had that run. We're familiar with that. But the difference is the Cardinals aren't just kind of this, they call them the cardiac cards, and that they're this 86-win team that goes on to win the World Series or whatever. But
83 one year, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's always an insane how is it? Look at their outfield. How is this a functional team?
Right.
But it's an appeal of them, and I think you don't necessarily have to be a St. Louis resident to like the team. And when I look back at, because Joe Mauer's weird for me. Most players I cover now, I have seen only as a media member, right? The first day I see them in person in the locker room.
Yep.
with Maurer, obviously, he's played for 15 years, been part of the organization for 18, right?
2001 he was drafted,
yep. First overall, famously, there were some people, even though he was the local guy, three-sport athlete, we all know this, could have played at Florida State, good basketball player as well. We're wondering why you didn't take Mark Pryor. Maurer alluded to, I think Teixeira was in that draft or something like that.
Teixeira went, I believe, 4th. I think it was Maurer, Pryor, DeJuan Brazelton went to the Tampa Bay Devil Rays.
Oops.
And then Mark Teixeira went 4th. Yeah, very Darko Milicic.
Yeah, for sure.
In DeJuan Brazelton.
And Maurer, who hands down has accumulated more WAR, has been the most productive player from that draft.
Yep.
Was the right pick, even though at one point, this team was on the verge of winning, this being the Twins, even though they were about to be contracted, right? It was a weird phase of Twins history.
They were still fighting that battle. The 2001 team was, I think they won 85 games. I think they were in the race
Tom Kelly's last year.
Yep, they were in the race until that last week or so against Cleveland, and just kind of put themselves back on the map. And it was the Minkiewicz, Hunter, Koski, Rivas, Guzman. I mean, Brad Radke had been around for a while by that time, but it was the team that really put baseball back on the map. And in fact, I think, speaking of Target Field and the retirement press conference that we saw on Monday, was I think that they were on a ESPN cover that's blown up in the Sid Hartman press conference room, and it's got like Torrey Hunter holding a bat, and Minkiewicz and all those guys. And then it kind of was a transitional period because they cycled out Minkiewicz for Morneau, and they cycled out Pierzynski for Maurer, and a couple of those guys hung on. In fact, Corey Koski was at the retirement press conference, and when he went to talk to Rocco Baldelli, it looked like the Spider-Man meme to me. Because other than like the Willy Willy beard that Rocco has right now, they're basically identical looking guys. And frankly, the fact that their careers both ended with weird injury things is kind of flying too close to the sun. But it was just funny to me too, like to see all the support for Joe. And something that we'll get further into as the show continues. But man, I tell you what, it's just funny how much the Twins have changed as an organization during Joe Mauer's time.
Yeah.
And then you think about it and you're like, how much did Joe have to do with all that?
Well, and not only that, he stayed the same. He used that same ridiculous 2006 T.I. song, right? Or used it
I think it came out that year.
Yeah.
Because I only remember a handful of songs that he ever used. So I mean, that's.
But it's the constant swing. He was always in number 7. And I look back at those pictures with him and Terry Ryan, again, another constant, 2 stints with the Twins, one obviously a little more successful than the other, but and how young he was, like he's now graying a little bit, started to show his age, obviously.
Talking about Joe?
Maurer.
He's very gray.
Yeah.
He looked really gray yesterday. I mean, so there's a picture that the Twins tweeted, or a video, like an evolution of Joe Mauer. It almost looks like it looks like the Roseanne intro later in the series where everybody kind of evolves. The weirdest part is that Becky on Roseanne wasn't even the same person from the beginning to the end. And so when you're evolving 2 different people, but I digress. I was like, if you ever wanted to imagine what Joe Mauer would have looked like if he was on Roseanne, that was it. And you could see the evolution of Joe from young, fresh-faced 18-year-old kid.
He looked like a nerdy kid. He had the glass.
19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid at the time, to literally grizzled veteran who, that we saw, or that I saw Monday at Target Field, and it's quite a change. I mean,
the 3rd kid on the way, married, all this, and his kids are 5. The little girls are 5. So
his wife was there, Maddie. The little ones were not, but she is ready to pop, and Wednesday she's being induced. So literally, like, imminent. That new baby is on deck.
By the way, weirdly, we all talked about Mauer all year because 2,000 hits, ending with, him putting on the catching gear and him climbing all these lists of Twins greats, and if not great players who obviously didn't finish as a catcher, but, was a catcher, all this stuff. Like, he like, no one mentioned, like, by the way, he has a 3rd kid coming along. Like, it's just funny that, like, those things usually come up just because, like, people are infinitely curious about the athletes. That
feels like something Mike Biardino would have brought up more often.
Yeah.
So one thing that we'll all miss about Mike being gone. Now, keep in mind, the Timberwolves are undefeated since Jimmy Butler left, right?
Yeah.
The Twins are actually undefeated since Mike Berardino left.
Yikes. I think
it was 4 games. I think they won the last 4 games or whatever. So I'm not saying that Mike Berardino was the Jimmy Butler of the Twins media corps. And far be it from me to bury our podcast comrade.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying.
That's so funny.
I mean, he wanted to go to a bigger market.
Yeah. Cover ND.
He wanted to get a new contract. He wanted to change it up.
I think we're onto something.
Yeah, I think we might be.
Anyway, Joe Mauer, fresh-faced. And you have to think about like that kid in that moment being like, I do believe he was sincerely a Twins fan growing up, who was a three-sport athlete, who just like by nature of all these things, because, if the Twins weren't bad at the time, they couldn't draft him. And,
So Terry saw him. I talked to Terry Ryan. They saw him at 14, and they're thinking, man alive, this kid's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you obviously, that's the kind of guy, if you put your scouting cap on, you're going to want to get your hands on from an organizational standpoint. Yeah. And obviously you don't know 4 years in advance where you're going to draft at all.
Yeah.
And to get the number 1 overall pick, though, like that's fortuitous. It's like
when Derrick Rose and the Bulls
when the
and
Nationals got the back-to-back first overall picks and got Bryce Harper and Steven Strasburg.
Yeah.
I think it's the other way around. It's so weird. Like they got the number 1 overall pick when Royce Lewis was available, even though there was no consensus number 1. Lewis looks like the same kind of transcendent personality, talent, and so on. But to get Mauer, Terry said, and he kind of laughed about it, we had to be really horrible the year before, and I was part of that too. So it wasn't like they were excited to be drafting number 1 overall.
No.
They may have been excited to get Joe, and he said they honed in on Joe about 10 days in advance of the draft. This will all be in an article that I'm posting very, very soon. But they were not excited to draft number 1, but they were excited to get Joe. And so I said, were you guys a little bit nervous, though? Because you're obviously flying in the face of Mark Pryor should be going 1 overall. He brought up Mark Teixeira's name unprompted. Like, those are the other 2 guys they really had in that mix. And I said, so, what's the nerve level for that? He said, well, when you can get a catcher who can do all the things he did defensively plus hit, you feel pretty good
Patrick
about
Royce, of course, brought up that weird stat where he's like, there was one, I think it was 2 different catchers in the NL have a batting title.
Yeah.
And Mauer has 3 in the AL, right?
There's been 3 in the AL, and they all belong to Joe Mauer.
Yeah.
That was the quintessential Royce question. I don't know if you heard him ask it.
Yeah, I did. So that audio, by the way, is in the feed.
Yep. So it's in the Midwest Swing feed. You can find it at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. But also the video on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us Zone Coverage on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah, we're close.
We're very close. So check us out there and hit the subscribe button. But yeah, you can get the video that I shot with. I was switching right arm, left arm, right arm, left arm. Because I forgot not my selfie stick, but my little extender.
Yeah.
So, it's as stable as can be.
Yeah.
About as stable as I am.
Right. So not very. But I think back in that and how you any athlete in Minnesota would be like, that'd be such a cool thing. Whether it'd be like being Thielen, right? Except that Thielen wasn't drafted. He wasn't undrafted. It'd be like Thielen come out of Mankato and then becoming a star. Receiver or whatever. But, and I thought at the time, and I thought even back in 2009, going into the contract, not only was this the Twins finally they had guys in the past who were good, Radke or Herbeck or Puckett, who had stayed, but, Carew, for example, ended with the Angels, right? A lot of great players, Johan Santana or whatever, had gone into a coastal market, larger coastal market to finish their career. I was like, not only do you get him in the prime, but this may be an opportunity for the Twins, who continually cannot beat the Yankees, to in some ways benefit from that in a weird way, to be maybe they're the small market foil. Like at some point, maybe they keep enough of their stars. And at the time you had Kadire and Morneau and all these players everyone is kind of familiar with, Nathan. Could they become like the Cardinals in the AL? And that'd be a tough task, but I was like, this is a contract that could fundamentally change how people view the Twins, not just locally. Like, hey, my favorite player isn't going to go somewhere else, but also nationally this is one of the best run organizations. They not only survived contraction, got a new stadium.
Yep.
And it's just like, when you look at what happened from there. In the piece I wrote, I'm not suggesting he should play through injuries or should have gone back to catcher after 13 or anything like that. But the mislabeling the bilateral leg weakness, I think that's just a knee injury he had going into the playoffs in 2010.
Yeah, no, it was 2011. Is it?
Yeah, 11.
Oh, yeah, like Pat Borsey wrote for MinPost.
Yeah.
It just the PR of it got just kind of bungled.
And so that starts the Joe Mauer's soft. So now you have
I think it ratcheted up.
Yeah.
I think the meniscus, which he tore literally in his second game ever, started the Joe Mauer is soft narrative.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it really took off until maybe 3-4 years in, when he wasn't hitting home runs as much as maybe people thought he was going to.
So the thing was no home run, no power.
Yep.
And he had the 28 that one year, but he hit 365. Like, it was insane, right? Those are cartoon numbers.
Literally the second best season for a catcher offensively by Fangraphs stat weighted runs created plus.
Yep.
Number 1 was Piazza, and I think number 3 was also Piazza, but Mauer was second on the all-time list.
In the old stadium contract year, all that stuff. And obviously people say, people kind of write this as like, well, it was a sign of things to come. Well, it was what happened in 10. 11, you had this mislabeled injury.
Yep.
12, 13.
And he's very, very good again.
He's again a 330 hitter, 40% on base. Still catching. And I think it should be noted that I think by then Morneau's gone or out the door, or close to out the door. Kadyr's probably in Colorado or the Mets. Mm-hmm. A lot of the core that was supposed to be there kind of left in 11. There was just this sense that, like, I think what happened is that baseball is a little like attendance numbers. People are like, why are they not supporting that team? And it's like, well, it's going to take 1 year for the attendance to show up because people have to buy the season tickets for the next season or whatever. It's a little like that with baseball, where it's like the issues within the organization, the lack of developing pitchers, probably just general not great drafting, some bad trades, all that stuff manifest themselves later than you'd expect. And so they looked fine in 10, but if you looked underneath the surface, and I'm sure the players knew this, they're like, man, it's going to get bad. There's just not much depth there.
What happened was, too, Joe Nathan missed all of 2010, came back for 2011, and I think that clubhouse atmosphere losing 99 games was toxic.
Yes.
So you lost Kadir.
Leader.
You lost Nathan.
Yep.
You lost Kubo.
Yeah.
Morneau got traded during 2013.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, he was never all the way back from the concussion in 2010. Yep. And so losing 4 of those 5 guys, if you include Mauer from leadership standpoint, you had Denard Span, who ended up dealing with concussion issues.
Yeah.
I mean,
Span was great. He still played a long time.
He's
still playing.
He's a free agent right now. You had a core that was not very well supported underneath. You made the wrong decision at shortstop with Nishioka.
Yeah.
Like I tweeted, the Brad Radke factory in Rochester went belly up.
Yeah.
They stopped mass producing the Scott Bakers and the Kevin Slowies.
Yep.
And they just shot themselves in the feet, or in the collective foot, by making decisions like keeping Nick Blackburn in the rotation over Slowey, so on and so forth.
Well, or what, like the Bartlett trade? Like, why would you want Delman Young in your locker room?
Well, Matt Garza. I mean,
yeah. Like you could have, and the Ramos one famously.
Yeah, especially the Ramos one. So it was bad personnel decision after bad personnel decision, some bad luck health wise, and it just kind of all snowballed. And the problem is, and this is the one reason why when people want to tank, whether it's football, like tank for Teddy, remember that?
Yeah.
And they ended up getting him 32nd overall. But they, everybody thought, oh, you're gonna have to take Teddy Bridgewater first overall. Yeah. If you invite a culture of losing into the building, it's very hard to shake it. And I think especially in baseball, where there's a continuity of players, leadership, all the way up to the front office, and then again you factor in the Twins' brand of loyalty. Literally every manager, except for, I want to say Billy Gardner before Tom
85
Kelly?
Or something like that.
Literally every manager that had been in charge of the Twins, as long as Joe Mauer had been alive, was at the press conference on Monday. That tells you, first of all, loyalty. Tom Kelly from the end of 86 all the way until end of 2001. You had Gardenhire from 2004 until 15, 16, 17 with Molitor. Molitor was there as well. And then Rocco Baldelli was there. So, I mean, you had 4 managers spanning...
It was Sorry, it was Ray Miller.
Ray Miller, I think, was Billy
Gardner was right, 81.
I think Billy Gardner was the manager when Kirby Puckett came up the first time.
Yeah.
So literally, virtually every manager that had been around since Joe Mauer was born, with the exception of Ray Miller, had been in the building at Target Field.
Yeah. Well, and
that's the respect he has.
And you have crazy. Mauer, obviously, reasonably so, after he was fired, didn't hold a press conference, but like Gardner did. He sat there and talked about his 7-22 record or whatever in the postseason.
I remember actually talking to him, and he kind of like poked me in the, like, almost like a Pillsbury Doughboy poke. I think he was just, it was just a different thing. He was very affable. Paul Mauer was a little more private, a little more, I wouldn't say curt, but a little bit more to the point.
Yeah.
Whereas Gardenhire was like,
I think he's a very technical thinker.
Yep.
If you look at how he views the game and all that, where Gardenhire's definitely, he's an entertainer, I think, at his core.
And I don't know where Rocco is going to fall on that, because he's going to be...
He's a unique guy.
He's going to be amazing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I just don't know where he's going to fall in that spectrum.
Yeah. And it's a unique culture. And I think in some ways, Mauer's sitting there being like, hey, Terry Ryan, who I was a fan of, drafted me, and like... all this stuff. Like, he got to know Tom Kelly, who won the World Series with the Twins.
Well, not only that, but Tom Kelly was the one who taught him first base.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of his legacy since coaching, or being done managing, as his roving instructor role would be to go down to Fort Myers and teach first basemen the finer points of the position. And that's that's where he and TK really became,
So you think about what the second half, and people will say it's a bad contract. I always go back to it. You have to assess a contract the day it's given. So if you go give a 35-year-old player a 5-year contract, you're like, well, that's a stupid contract, because most guys aren't going to play until they're 40. Or
unless they're Torrey Hunter.
Unless you're Torrey Hunter or another guy they probably should have kept around, right? Given his locker room presence and how gifted he was in the outfield.
You know what though? The 5-year deal to a guy like Torrey beating himself up on the turf, I get it.
Yeah.
They offered him 3 years. They offered him $45 million. That was never going to get it done, but I totally understood it at the time.
Yeah.
Plus, if you keep Torrey, you never know if Denard Span becomes Denard Span, if Carlos Gomez gets much of a chance. So,
yeah, and now Gomez was the and we don't need to go through all this, but the point is there was kind of this Twins way, and I think part of it was the sabermetrics that they were so far behind on. Right, it took a while until they kind of realized, okay, we need to bring in like Falvey and Levine, some guys who are experts in this, and start implementing it throughout the system.
Yeah, they needed some. I mean, we've seen a 2-year learning curve.
Yeah, and it may be part of the reason the flow of information may have been Mauer and all that. But so you have the Twins going from one of the best run organizations, beating the odds, beating contraction, drawing people to the bad state, the stupid Metrodome. That was not a good. It was a good football stadium, but not a good baseball stadium.
Yeah.
To a team with all the riches of they're willing to spend on the payroll, and they got all these people coming out the stadium, and yet given they should have like taken the next step. It'd be like if in Tampa Bay you had ownership that was willing to spend a little bit more, and they were in a sweet outdoor stadium in Tampa, right? Mm-hmm. You would think, or Oakland or whatever. If they, whatever, you would think that.
I think those teams all have to try emulate St. Louis. To your
earlier point. Yeah.
If you can't be the Yankees, you can't be the Dodgers. Which, I mean, Boston can, maybe in a weird year.
Boston sort of can, but it's like even they can't spend that much.
Yeah, if you can't be those teams, you want to be Boston on the high end or St. Louis on the low end. Because think about St. Louis. Sorry to to screw with your point, but if St. Louis is done with you, it's very rare that it's a bad move. Kind of like the Vikings the last few years, where Antoine Winfield was done. He retired.
But what St. Louis does is they're like, Albert Pujols will pay you this much. It's a lot of money. We're not going to give you what the Angels will, because that's stupid.
And look at now.
But he got bad contract.
Yep, he can't move. He can't play.
But not only that, it's a bad contract because they didn't draft him. They didn't get any value on the front end, right?
Right. And they didn't get any of the front end.
Yeah.
Surplus value, they call it on Fangraphs, like Joe Mauer winning the batting title in 2006 while making probably like $420,000 or something.
Yeah, and so, and I don't mean to beat the St. Louis point over and over again, but it's like you would just think logically, you'd be like, look at what the A's did this year, or Tampa did this year, with their limited resources, one in a stadium that literally floods with feces, right? Because if the septic tank doesn't work, and the other one, the lights fall from the ceiling or whatever. You're like, well, if you put in a good stadium in Tampa and you put a good, people will come out, support the A's more or whatever. But all of a sudden the Twins have this sweet stadium and all, the fans all coming out in droves to the new stadium and all this support because they have the hometown guy and because the team won 94 games I think in the first season and all this stuff.
It may have been more than that.
And yet, completely behind the eight ball. Behind the whole trends with the sabermetrics and stuff. So at the same time, you have the.
You're right. 94 wins. Sorry.
Yeah, you have the organization falling behind, and then Joe Mauer already considered soft because of an injury that started his career, an injury in 11. 13, he gets hit in the head with a routine like that. That happens all the time. It sounds weird, but it's like catchers get hit in the head with baseballs all the time because and the hard thing about this is, and this is what I wrote, is like it's not a broken leg. You can't see like a physical injury like that. You also people see Giancarlo Stanton hit a baseball and it like goes straight out of the park and blow. Remember, it like blew up a screen in the Miami that one line drive. A ball can come out that hard the other way, right? You can tip it the other way and it's, screaming off the bat and hits the guy in the mask. And it doesn't look like it's that bad because you don't see it travel very far.
For sure.
But do you remember who the Met player was who was at bat during that? Whoever it was, like.
No, I don't.
God knows who it is, but like. It doesn't matter. It's like they're capable of swinging hard at a ball that's thrown really hard and it's going to hit you in the mask and give you a concussion. And who knows how many concussions Mauer had as an amateur football player, as a catcher growing up. Perhaps in basketball, less likely.
Yeah, but, possible though.
But then like it's just this weird thing that I never understood where people smartly were like, yeah, in the 3 years after that concussion, he hit like an amateur or a pedestrian first baseman. And he was learning the position, so he wasn't as good defensively as he was towards the end, although I felt like he transitioned well there. But you're going down the defensive spectrum and stuff. And it was so weird to me that it's like, how come you can't put this together? Like, obviously he was very injured. If he went from Hall of Fame catcher, in his peak, I think from 08 to 13, he hit like 327 and was on base over 40% of the time. And all of a sudden he's a 267 hitter. That's on base, like 33% of the time or so, maybe less. And it's weird to me that they're like, yeah, he's just soft. He won't go behind the plate and he's not hitting. And you're like, no, like obviously something's wrong with him. Like if gradually you may hit that point, but you don't hit it that suddenly, especially in the prime of your career. And then after those 3 years, hits 305 or something like that.
Yep. Not
quite 40% on base, but creeping towards that.
Just 380 something.
Yeah, team makes the postseason. And last year he was fine, I mean, I think the concussion. Did you think he might retire? Do you think he might have been done? Because like it was a weird thing where like it was a routine play, a foul ball that he.
Ike Davis is the hitter.
Ike Davis, how weird.
So Ike Davis, Anthony Swarzak was the pitcher.
Oh, really?
And the opposing starter that day was Dylan G, who ended up being a Twin last year.
Yeah.
So lots of small world connections there.
But I mean, did you think? Against Anaheim in mid-Bay this year, because like he wasn't injured right away. He was fine. It's like, yeah, he has neck stiffness and like he played 12 innings the next day.
I don't think I really thought about retirement until it wasn't long after he came back. I think at the beginning of the year I was thinking, this could be it, but it might be a Kevin Garnett situation where he'd sign a deal that you might say, oh, that's a little more than I would have given him, but like 2 years, $10 million per year next year.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought.
But it would have been like, the goodwill contract where he's going to play maybe 3 days a week. He'd be a good, bench guy for not only offense, but in terms of like teammate and all that stuff.
I thought he was the leadoff guy that you tell Buxton, look, Mauer's a star, but he's 36. You're entering your prime. You should be able to displace him as the leadoff hitter, right? If everything's going right for you, give him his speed.
You make him the house of cards that Byron Buxton needs to topple over.
Because I think that's so much better than being like the Aaron Hicks strategy of, hey, we traded away the two center fielders. It's all yours. That
throw
clearly
him in the
didn't
deep
work.
end of the pool and see.
Yeah,
if
he was
swim.
hitting 0. I'll never forget looking up the scoreboard and being like, .040. I'm like, that's a weird number to be up on. Like
for Aaron Hicks?
Aaron Hicks, yeah, because they traded Revere and Span, right?
I think he was like 1 for 32 at one point or something.
Yeah, and you're like, obviously that wasn't the right thing to do. You're killing this guy who's a star in New York.
Oh, he was so good that spring too. That's what was so hard for me was I totally got it. But he faced Justin Verlander. Like, how big of a mind effort is facing Justin Verlander in your first MLB game with Vance Worley on the mound for you?
Yeah, that's Vance Worley with his lack of sleeves in the cold. Yeah, regardless, the point is like, you don't know. We don't know now if he doesn't suffer that injury. And I remember talking to him, and it was one of those eerie things where you're like, dude, like, this is a bad sign, because he was, I think, hitting 300 into that injury. And then, like,
Joe?
Yeah. And then I think he dropped to like 260 and then bounced back up to around 280 towards the end of the season. But I remember being like, man, this is a bad sign for your career. And just like for your life, it's a brain injury. And that it was these lingering symptoms, and no one really knew how bad it was. And we don't know that if they had made the postseason this year, maybe he risked it. But I look back and I was like, that last day, and I watched it on TV. You were there. I mean, we had talked about it a little bit. We were like, there's no way you can put him behind the plate. And
I still maintain that I wasn't wrong.
Well, I mean, it's a stunt, and it's fine. It was fine.
They had to talk to Yoan Moncada
don't swing at it.
Rick Renteria and say, please don't swing. We'll throw a ball and call it at that. So he didn't really catch as much as he caught the first pitch.
But just let me go down the alternate history road. If they're in the playoffs, that doesn't happen, because like that game means something. So you can't really do that. I just don't know how that would be done. They did the best given the circumstances they're in. It was a disappointing 78 win season. The White Sox are in the middle of their rebuild, which looks serious. I don't know what you think, but it seems really like they have a lot of prospects. Like they are.
By the way, I talked to Thad Levine. I said, the fact that you guys won 78 games with everything that went wrong, you got to be actually kind of like pleased with that. And he goes, honestly, if you would have told me all those things would have happened before the year, and you told me that we would have won 78 games, I would have never believed you. So,
yeah. I mean, they benefited from a historically bad division, of course.
Well, and they also played teams down the stretch that were less interested in winning. With the Ron Gardenhire Tigers and the White Sox. I think they won like 8 of their last 9 games to make it look a little better. But still, yeah, it's I totally get what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, they made the best of a bad situation. He did leg out the double, and I mean,
that was a pretty cool moment. If that would have been it, that wouldn't have been the Disney ending. We got the Disney ending with the catching. Yes. It would have been the satisfying ending, where you get up with your wife or girlfriend or whoever you're at the movie with, you say, "Oh, that was good," and instead we got where you're standing up with tears coming down your eyes and you're clapping at the end of a freaking movie. Like that was how cool it was. Like I watched the YouTube video that they posted 2 days before he retired, and it probably should have occurred to us that he was going to retire with those videos circling, whatever. But I'm getting chills thinking about it now. It's not even on in front of me or anything. It's just, holy cow, that is...
Well, there's a few endings that could happen, right? And so you could have... like the weird, like, oh, he's done, right?
What if he'd have been out at second base on that double?
Yeah, no.
The one where it just happened that way.
Yeah.
The placement of everything was perfect, all the way down to the left fielder chasing the ball, throwing it, and it just being late.
Yeah.
Like, unless you would have thought that, I think it was Moncada putting the tag on, could have taken a split second off that to...
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't have scripted it better. That's what's amazing about baseball, is that sometimes you couldn't script things better because the game just takes care of it.
No, and you ideally, really, was it Smalley retired after 87 or something like that after the World Series? Like, ideally...
yeah, I think so.
Ideally, Maurer, the hometown kid, walks off victorious or whatever at age 40 when they...
Not everybody gets their John Elway moment.
Yeah. And I think the worst case scenario is... someone knees him in the head, turning a double play, or he gets hit, incidentally gets hit in the head with a baseball. That's the risk you take if you play this season, right? And like, to me, it's really like he can't drop much from that 280 and be a productive first baseman, given his power profile and all that stuff.
And so if I would have asked another question, because Corey was trying to give me the mic to ask another one, I said, I'm good. What I would have asked was the fact that you still suffered a concussion as a first baseman. Did you feel that actually vindicated your move out from behind the plate? Because I think it does. I think the fact that he was that susceptible to a concussion, people say, did he really have to come out from behind the plate? Obviously, Mayo Clinic told him all that stuff. But I think that people just needed to realize that, look, he was that compromised from a physical standpoint that a diving play where he doesn't even hit his head or anything that's how compromised his head was and what he played through every single day. And
there's the argument you can get hurt anywhere. He did extend his career. And it goes back to, I think people don't take him seriously that is competitive because he's not like the rah-rah whatever. If you're not competitive, you might just leave after 13 and just be like, this is a serious injury. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what I asked him too was, when did you, the one question I did get out was, when did you first consider retirement?
Yeah.
And I didn't lead him with the question. I didn't try to say, oh, did you think about it after 2013 or whatever? And he said that actually the first time he thought about it was earlier in the year after the concussion this year. So he didn't think about it. I mean, he could have been maybe shielding from the question, but he didn't think about it before this year. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
So in my mind, it's just like in sports, you kind of don't like the scripted stuff, but it was, I think if anything, that moment, it obviously there's the Hollywood plot of he becomes a catcher again, right, for one pitch. Mm-hmm. I think the indie plot there is it's such a reminder that was so long ago. Like I talked to you.
It didn't even look right.
Right, like the equipment, because he literally ripped it out of his bag from 5 years ago because obviously he didn't have much use for it.
It looked ill-fitting. It looked...
And it just was like, because, I know he was really young when he was drafted, but think how he kind of looked in 13.
Nothing like he does now.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was looking at old pictures because I had mentioned Hunter, and Hunter obviously bounced around a little bit, came back to the Twins. I have an old photo of, I don't know how many people remember Morneau was like a White Sox player for a real brief stint. But how weird it's so weird to see him in the White Sox uniform.
I think he finished that year here against the Twins.
Yeah,
I don't remember if he hit a homer or not. I want to say he did, but
because it took him a while. He was good in Colorado after a few years with all the concussion stuff.
Didn't he and Kadire have a decent year together?
Yeah, I think so, in Colorado.
Morneau's final game was October 2nd, 2016 against the Minnesota Twins
in the White Sox uniform.
Yep.
So just kind of like what a way to go out. What a way to go out, but it's also again kind of that reminder of like in some ways it seems weird, but it seems like it's Joe Mauer playing Joe Mauer, like the Joe Mauer we know in that last 5 years, trying to bounce back from the injury at first base. Just looked significantly older. And the contrast, you're like, it's so weird that's the same guy because he was just in the majors so long. He played with Corey Koski. You talked about Brad Radke's last year. He played with Santana. He played with Morneau. He also played with Brian Dozier and Trevor Plouffe. And think of how many Twins cycled in and out, especially in those bad years. The Luke Hugheses and these
Steve Holmes.
Yeah, like just my goodness.
Morneau, by the way, did homer against the Twins, but it was in July, not in October.
Okay.
So, it's crazy. Do you want to wrap with a few questions from the reader or the listeners?
Yeah.
So we did get a few. I put out the bat signal beforehand. Jake Palmer wants to know if I have any Joe Mauer memorabilia, and I really don't because it was always such a tough ticket for Twins Fest. It was big money and long lines, so I don't even think I have anything. I always tell people he came up my senior year of high school. We retired now that I have a kid, so like his entire career spanned my adulthood. So I have to be honest with you. There's a lot of feelings inside of like, holy crap, I'm not young anymore either.
Well, and
32 is not old, but you know what I mean. So no, I don't have any Joe Mauer stuff. I imagine I'll get my hands on some eventually, but right now, no, I don't have anything. Maxwell Law wants to know if Joe Mauer would have been my pick for 2006 MVP. And honestly, I'm pulling up the leaderboard right now. I think I want to say Derek Jeter would have been my pick. Oh, wow. So, according to Fangraphs WAR, the best player in the AL that year was Grady Sizemore, which I would have never guessed. Speaking of players who had careers.
Who was 11th in voting that year.
Yeah, and then you have Derek Jeter, who was second with a 6.1. So Grady Sizemore should have been MVP that year. Justin Morneau was, holy smokes, he wasn't even in the top 30.
But he won it.
Joe Mauer would have been a much better choice. So I would have gone with either Jeter or Sizemore. I'm looking up Morneau here. I don't even see him. He was 48th among MLB players in Fangraphs WAR, so I'd imagine he was probably somewhere like 20th in the ML or the AL. So no, not a great choice with Morneau. I would have probably gone with Jeter, to be honest with you. So Andrew Bagansky wants to know, how insane is it that Mauer has more than double the WAR of Benito Santiago, Grady Sizemore, and Mo Vaughn? Well, we were just talking about Grady Sizemore. I mean, obviously, the cautionary tale, he's almost like a Rocco Baldelli story unto himself. But Benito Santiago, I mean, these aren't names I really think about with Joe Mauer either necessarily. So, and the other thing, too, my contention is that WAR really undervalues catchers. There's been one catcher ever with more than 70 Fangraphs WAR. It was Johnny Bench. There have been something like 20 or 24 outfielders that have had that much. I think that catchers deserve a bigger bump because a really great catcher is worth their weight in gold. So, I don't know. We'll see.
I have an odd question on that regard. I certainly he wanted to catch. Royce had a good story about how his freshman year he actually stuck with the freshman team because he could catch at Creighton.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about that.
And I understand why you wouldn't want to be in the outfield. Does part of you, and I remember Gardy saying something, I obviously wasn't covering the Twins the whole time. He was like, Mauer made it clear he didn't want to be in the outfield. But if you could, hindsight's 20/20, if you did it again, you'd have him catch all the time. But would you have days where you put him in the outfield just because how much work it is to catch, how it's bad for your body, you're sitting in the crouch position or whatever, and maybe to set him up for later in his career, even if you're starting this in like 11 or 12?
No, if I was going to do outfield, I would have done outfield full time.
The only reason why I bring that up is he's a little bit faster than people think, I think, because he's a good base runner.
He's just instinctual or instinctive. I don't know what the word would be.
But he has great arm. Like, you think he'd be throwing guys out at second all the time.
He'd have been a wonderful right fielder if that's the route they would have gone. And so I would have had no problem with him playing right field full time. But if they were going to go a route of what do you do in addition to catching, first or third base would have been it for me. Third would have made more sense because Morneau's existence at that point. Yeah. Now, with Morneau being hurt, it would have made sense for Mauer to fill in for Morneau as Morneau was coming back. Yeah. And I think they used Michael Kadire for that role in a lot of ways too. But I don't know. I don't think I would have gone catcher/outfielder because I can't remember a player where that they've actually done that before. So next question, Adam West wants to know, was the scholarship that Joe Mauer turned down to Florida State more than the scholarship Adam Thielen had, which was $500, in case you haven't heard? So he's poking fun at the fact that there's graphics saying that the Adam Thielen got a $500 scholarship. Yeah, Joe Mauer's scholarship was $700. Got to stick to the 7. So it would have been crazy to see him become an NFL quarterback, though. I mean,
the weird thing, though, concussions probably would have altered his career, given what we know about football.
And the problem is, though, we still wouldn't have known how good he could have been at baseball. So you're still playing a great what-if game no matter what he did.
Can you imagine if he had done that route where he play football at Florida State? Like, who's the guy who Oakland drafted, and I think he's the quarterback at Oklahoma. His name will hit me, but
well, I know that Chris Wenke did both.
Yeah, but I think currently the Oklahoma quarterback,
Brandon Weeden.
Kyler
Murray.
Kyler Murray. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking Brandon Weeden did a little bit where he was.
Michael Vick was drafted by the Rockies.
Johnny Manziel was drafted,
and Russell Wilson.
Tom
Brady might have been.
He's gone to spring training a few times.
Regardless, it's a weird rabbit hole we're going down, but it would have been funny to see him play at Florida State 3 years, then go join the Twins or something like that. You know?
I'm trying to imagine Terry Ryan allowing that, and
it's probably not a good idea, to be honest.
So Devlin Clark wants to know: do we see him in a similar role to Torrey, Morneau, Kadire down the road? Maybe not as a broadcaster, but a special assistant or spring training coach. Yeah, but I think it's 3-4 years down the road at least because his kids are so young.
Yeah, here's where first of all, I think that he'll probably be at Target Field occasionally. I think it's really hard to go cold turkey after doing it all the time.
It'd be kind of cool if he became a fixture in the Champions Club.
Well, and honestly, I look at it like this with Molitor. What Molitor should do for the Twins is focus on his biggest strength, which is seeing the little things. And he should be going kind of player to player and being like, are you seeing this? Because I think this guy's tipping a pitch. Or do you know that you're doing this when you're
like Torrey Hunter was able to do as a player.
I mean, I feel like Torrey Hunter is like the happy shoulder angel, right? It's so hard to be like angry around, or like you can have a bad day and he'll sit there and cheer you up, right? I mean, it's just like he's very charismatic naturally. I think Mauer's role should be what he did at the end of his career, which is going up to a guy and being like, I saw that you did this and this contributed to winning. Because I think for young players, I know JR told me this all the time. I know like younger guys say this all the time. It means a lot when a star player comes up to you and says, I saw what you did here.
Yeah.
And I think if that's all he does for the Twins, it never becomes a batting coach, whatever. I think he's offering something valuable, and that's what his role should be.
So the last one is, what is your favorite WTF stat for Joe Mauer? And I think I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but he hit .317 with a .423 on base and a .537 slugging against Justin Verlander, 4 homers, which is more than he had against anybody else, 15 walks and 14 strikeouts. So basically the guy that is absolutely still a star.
You said .317. What were the other numbers?
.423, .537. So he had a .959 OPS against Verlander. He had a .964 against Felix Hernandez and a .914 against Corey Kluber, some of the best righties in the game. An .890 against Zach Greinke. 2 guys that owned him. Think of 2 lefties that he would have faced a whole lot.
Sale.
Nope.
Oh.
One is still going and one recently retired.
2 lefties that own.
Think of the guy who he faced in his MLB debut.
Oh.
I'm kind of motioning a big guy.
Hopefully. I know. I'm trying. Bartolo
CC
came to.
Sabathia.
Oh, CC, that's right.
And then Mark
Which was
Burley.
Indians CC, right?
Yep. And then Mark Burley. So
he had some Mark
trouble.
Burley was great.
He had some trouble with the lefties, but yeah, those to me, I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily WTF stats. I want to see just a quick look at strikeouts. Who he faced the most without striking out.
While you're looking that up, actually, I'm going to wait on this.
29 plate appearances against Joel Pinheiro, 0 strikeouts. 31 against Jake Westbrook, 0 strikeouts. 26 against Clay Buchholz, 0 strikeouts. So he faced a lot of guys with 0 strikeouts. Paul Bird, 35 times, 0 strikeouts. Craig Breslow, 12 times, 0 strikeouts. R.A. Dickey, 18 times, 0 strikeouts. So Joe Mauer had a number of guys.
Let's finish with this, because I think this is a question that I'm surprised didn't come up. People are going to ask about the Hall of Fame, and you go back to what I wrote. He stays healthy. It's almost a surefire thing, right?
It is a surefire thing. Yep.
I think it should be, given that he was a catcher, as he said, that he, in his peak, and I just pulled up the numbers because it's pretty easy to do. So I would say the peak was 06 to 13. Those are the first and last All-Star games he was in. By the way, just missed the 14 All-Star game, right, which is the Target Field one, which is kind of one of those like weird bummers that you're like,
it was Perkins and Suzuki, I think.
The
final out.
327, 410, 473. That's as a catcher. That's with 2 bad seasons. He was sub 300 at age 24 in 07. And then obviously at age 28 in 11, he had the bilateral.
That's a Hall of Famer to me.
Yeah. And I know that people are going to look, from 14 on, and you can't disregard that. But I always go back to, like, what a weird, like Santana didn't finish up great. By the way, that was 278, 359, 388. I mean, not like phenomenal numbers, but also like serviceable. He finishes as a above 3, so he finishes 306, 388, 348, 439.
That's a Hall of Famer. He's going to get in. The only thing that bums me out is that I'm not going to be able to vote for him, because even if I get into BBWA in the next year or so, which is a career goal of mine, that means that he will have had to been on the ballot 5 times and not be voted in those 5 times. If he doesn't make it on the first 5 times, I would be a little bit more uncertain about his chances, but I think he'll get in before that.
And I guess my final thought is that it's just cool to have a player. This is what you'd want as a fan of the team, or even just a person in Minnesota. That's like, he wanted to win here specifically. I think at the end of Moneyball, where Billy Beanes offered the job to Boston, he goes, "No, I want to do it in Oakland." He still can do that post-career.
Yep.
Hopefully there's something he can do for the Twins. I kind of suggested a potential job role. But, like, whatever it is, I'm hoping he does something for the Twins that is meaningful, that in the end, whoever the players are who win it go, well, it's also because we had Bauer around and Torrey and Kadire, right? Like the ex-players that are pushing them along. So, yeah, it's weird. It's like it's a great career. It's a Hall of Fame career, and yet I kind of go, man, what if he hadn't the foul tip? What if
could have been a legend instead of a star or a superstar?
And and at the end of the day, who knows? You hope that it's Byron Buxton, Sano, Royce Lewis, Gearlov. There's Barrios. I mean, there's a handful of these guys. Unfortunately, they need some more pitching. But
they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have for this episode. Thank you, Joe Maurer, for 15 wonderful years as a Twin. Be sure to stay tuned to Midwest Swing all off season. We're expecting a fairly exciting, interesting, and eventful off-season for your Minnesota Twins. But for Eric, the producer, for Tom Schreier at TSchreier3 on Twitter, I'm Brandon Warne. You can find me at Brandon_Warne. And until next time, so long.